Hello again. Welcome back to Print Island and to the Lighthouse. My name is Richard Askam, and I am joined today. Finally, there's a story to be told here, ladies and gentlemen. It's all my fault, by the way, before I cast aspersions, by Betsy Davis. Good afternoon.
Hello there. How are you? Not sick.
Stressed, yes,
Not
not
sick.
sick, stressed with technology. Yeah, but other than that, still alive. So we'll go with that.
I love it.
And am I right in saying I see a cushion behind you? Are you in Oklahoma or from Oklahoma?
I am both. I was born and raised in Oklahoma, left for 21 years, came back what will be almost 5 years ago. And you
Okay,
can't see it, but I'm sitting out looking over a beautiful lake. So I bought a lake home and left
nice.
Chicago and came back to my home state. So I am sitting in and from Oklahoma.
There you go.
And
And Chicago,
it's been such a blessing and so much fun.
yeah, good. And Chicago, of course, has probably the world's biggest lake next to it. I've enjoyed walking down Lakeside Drive many a time.
Same. I lived there for 8 years. Absolutely loved it. Still miss it all the time. But yeah, it doesn't even look like a lake.
Yeah.
It's wide and right in the middle of the city, and it makes it really special.
I think that was one of the things I enjoyed about it the most, actually, because I live in the countryside in the UK when I'm not on Print Island, obviously. I like space, I like sky. And whenever you're in the center of a city, you tend to have that sort of vertical drop, don't you, where they've dropped you in
Mhm.
and you can't quite see the sky. Chicago, somehow, although it does have that high rise, but because of the proximity to the lake, it never feels like that.
It's one of the things I love about it. I always say in New York City, I feel like I can't walk anywhere and give it one of these because you're going to hit something, a building, a person, a
Yeah,
taxi cab, something. In Chicago, there, to your point, there's breathing room.
yeah.
And yeah, it's a really cool city. If anybody hasn't been, you must. Yeah,
There
yeah,
you go.
it's one of my
This,
favorites in the
this feels like the
States.
Chicago Tourist Board, doesn't it, that we're doing now? We're doing their
I
job
know,
for them.
I know.
Although I gather at this time of year it can be a little cold in Chicago.
It is one thing I don't miss when winter starts in November and it doesn't end until May. It's a little much.
Yes,
It's a little much. So
exactly.
I'm appreciating the fact that it is going to be 70 degrees here, which is not normal, by the way. It was
Okay.
-10 last week in Oklahoma,
Wow.
and yesterday it was almost 80 degrees. So
Oh,
we get a
gosh.
little bit of everything.
Okay, excellent. Well, listen, it's lovely to have you here in the Lighthouse. And we've tried to do this a few times for anybody that's watching this. Betsy and I have struggled to get through various illnesses over the last few weeks, and I've cancelled a couple of times. But it's an absolute pleasure to have you on today. And for anybody that's watching this that doesn't know who you are, give us the 5 minute flyby of your life and times.
Life and time. So since we're talking print, I'll start from there. Um, so Betsy Davis, currently I'm the Chief Marketing Officer and EVP of Sales, but also have my own book of business. So I'm also a salesperson for Sandy Alexander, that many people know about in the industry. Have been with that company for it'll be 8 years in June, which is crazy to think about. But in August of last year, I celebrated 25 years in the print industry. So um, started right out of college with Consolidated Graphics and went into their kind of wasn't officially, but part of their leadership development program and was with that company for 13 years. Up and just left one day, making 30-year-old decisions, deciding what I wanted to be when I grew up. And of course, I come right back to print about 6 months later and moved to Chicago and worked for a company called Quantum Group, was with them for 5 years. During that time, I was on the HP Indigo Advisory Council and met Mike Graff, who was CEO of Sandy Alexander, David Bennett, all these wonderful people that we all know from all the places. And Mike, on the very first time I met him, said, "You'll work for me one day." And about 3 years later, I worked for him. So since then, I've been with Sandy Alexander, but I've been in print my entire career. And like I always say, once the ink gets in your blood, it's hard to leave.
Yeah.
And so here I am.
Yeah, and that's quite an interesting story because in many ways you are the example of what the industry is trying really hard to do, which is to get college kids
Mm.
interested in print. And here we are. You are that. What first got you interested when you were sat there on whatever leafy college campus you were studying on, thinking, do you know what? I quite fancy a career in print. How did that happen?
That is not how this happened. That is not how this happened. I didn't even know what print meant. But I graduated with a marketing and sales focused degree from a college here in Oklahoma. And my sister was a controller accountant for a commercial printing company that was owned by Consolidated Graphics in Tulsa, Oklahoma. So me being 22 years old, on a Saturday, I wanted her to go out drinking with me. And so I would go to her office and she'd be closing the books and in this print facility that smelled and gave me a headache after being in there for just a few minutes. I'm like, what are you doing in this place? But because it was owned by Consolidated, they had some of their leadership development members as part of their team. So I met a handful of them right as I graduated college, met one of the presidents of one of the facilities in Texas. He meets me and says, you could come sell print for me. My only objective was to get out of Oklahoma, get a job. And so yeah, I packed up my U-Haul and I moved to San Antonio, Texas, and that's how the journey began. So I did a year-long training of actually working on the presses, throwing paper on the cutter and the bindery, catching off the folder, doing all the things. I said this to somebody the other day, I called ink paint for the first 2 weeks working on the press floor. Like, I need more red paint
Yeah,
for the
that's
press.
okay. That's okay.
Yes, rather than magenta ink.
Yeah.
But anyway, so it was totally by happenstance, and I oddly just kind of fell in love with the manufacturing side of it, the people, um, seeing something go from ideation to in the marketplace, that I got to see it in the hands of folks. I thought that was really interesting, and it's been a really good industry to me so far.
Quite fun, isn't it, when you get back into a print shop, and I'm sure you still do that from time to time, and those smell is a very evocative sense, and you smell in your case the paint or the ink. I come
Yes.
from the drinks industry, from the wine business, so whenever
Mm,
literally whenever anybody drops a glass of wine or breaks a bottle on the floor, the smell that I get is the place that I worked when I was 18 years old,
oh, I
and
love it.
it takes you straight there. So yeah, that and you said when you I can't remember what expression you used about when the ink's in your blood, it never leaves, or something along those lines.
Hmm.
There's something about it, isn't it, that once it is
Hmm.
part of your sensory world, and the touch and the feel and the smell and what have you, so hard to explain to people when they don't know what print actually is.
That's right. Even the sound. Do you know when you're in a we all talk about we want to hear that sound, and it's that click, 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 click
Yeah,
of whether it's the litho press or the digital press or the folder. There's that sound too that you love when you walk into a print company. And I love when I walk people through our facility that have never been to it. The cutter is also always the most fascinating with the big
yeah,
guillotine, and
yeah,
everybody's
yeah.
just thinks that's the coolest thing ever. But yeah, there's definitely, one of the other things I learned, because I did try to exit for about 2 months and I realized that wasn't going to work, but I love the pace of it.
Mm,
The schedules, and always, there was always something that needed to get done to meet the timeline. And so there's something about the pace of it that I
mm.
also really enjoy.
No, it's got a fascination, I think, about as an industry. I went a few years ago to a paper factory in Scotland. Never been to a paper mill before, and although the guys I was with, they were dyed-in-the-wool printers and they knew everything about everything, and I knew nothing about everything. But I stood at the point on the production line where the paper turns from liquid pulp to physical paper, and there is an absolute scientific whiz bang witchcraft moment. And if we could bottle that and show more people, the wider world, the non-industry people, not just the physical attributes and the science and the chemical reactions and so on and so forth, but take that as part of the lesson into product. And if you could
Hmm.
show people what they want, we all know that they like printed stuff. That most people don't even know that it is printed stuff. But
That's
but
right.
but the story that comes from there, from the industry side, somewhere there's a gap between this is a wonderful thing to I don't know what you do. How would you fill the gap?
That's a great question. I actually have talked about it a lot, primarily because of what you just said about trying to get a younger generation to become a part of our industry.
Mm.
And I keep saying this, like, we have to figure out a way to evangelize what a cool and interesting industry It is. One of the things that we've been doing, just because we talked about before we even jumped on today about how there's just content galore.
Yeah.
But we've really been trying to use video, like we just presented internally, to all of our team members. We called it a day in the life of um, the J. Crew catalog,
Nice.
and basically told the story from the voice of the catalog, like he was the one telling the
Okay. That's
story.
nice. Yeah.
It was very interesting, and just to talk about, being on the press and all the way through to going into somebody's mailbox and to hear it from that perspective was really interesting. So we're trying to find different ways to show really visually strong what it all means to
Mm,
go from ideation to what is this thing in your mailbox that you didn't know that it took 3 months of planning to get it there.
mm.
Um, so yeah, so that's part of it is, and we've started our podcast Color Bar, and so we're trying to get the word out in kind of a different and interesting way from that perspective too. I just had one of our young ladies join Color Bar. She's and works with me on our marketing team, and she was talking about she had no idea what she was getting into either, but she's like, I love that we get to touch so many different brands, and
Yeah.
then to be able to see their work out in the wild is really interesting. So I think that there's definitely an opportunity for us to be able to, as we're putting content out there, for the content to not just be the final piece, which we're really
Yeah.
good about doing a gallery of our work, but let's do a gallery of how it got there and a
Mm.
gallery of all the stops and starts that it takes to get to that place.
I think that's a really good point as well, because there is the risk in the comms piece that people think the job is done when it's created, and don't necessarily look to see A, who's looking at it, B, whether that's actually having any impact. Because it's fair to say and true to say we live in a video age. We live in a world of YouTube and Instagram, and the way that people are, those pesky young people that I like to think about, like my daughter, they consume their information so differently to
Hmm.
certainly me. And I'm 150 years old, but in terms of the evolution of comms, has to be met by the way the audience wishes to see or hear it. I always say, Betsy, that you do a lot of speaking like me, and the only job of a speaker is to be heard. So you have to find the way that the audience wishes to listen to you.
That's
Otherwise,
right.
if they're not listening, you might as well not bother talking. So in the same way that when we're creating marketing communications, whatever style or flavor that is, whether it's TikTok or a printed brochure, it doesn't really matter. Whatever it is, it has to be seen, it has to be read. And
Hmm.
you make a really good point about video, because one of the things, and from a brand perspective, because where I think a lot of the comms gets lost is print businesses will tell you what they do brilliantly, but they won't tell you why. And it's that little why piece, which is the brand, is the campaign, is the agency, whatever the work is for, is why they're doing it. So if we could get to the why a bit sooner, maybe people would buy into it a bit more.
It's interesting that you said that. I just had David Rosendahl on Color Bar, who is with Mindfire, and
I
actually
know,
Chris
Dave.
Min as
Yeah.
well. And we were talking about the purpose of the piece. And, we do a lot of work at Sandy Alexander for the dining industry, where we're printing the menus
Yeah.
that you're holding in the restaurant space. But we go into those same conversations with the dining industry, just like we do with a retailer talking about their direct mail piece. Like, what is your intention? What
Mm.
is the purpose of the piece? Who are you trying to reach? What are you trying to do? Um, and so, how can we help you execute that in a way that, to your point, gets heard,
Mm.
gets seen, gets touched, gets left on the coffee table so they see it over and over again. So yeah, the intention and the purpose is a big part of the conversations that we're having too.
Because I don't think genuinely consumers recognize just how many items that they touch in any given day is a printed item. Mark Subers from Printing United always talks about walking. If you walk down a supermarket aisle and there was no print, everything would. Well, he says aluminum, but I say aluminium. Everything would just be an aluminium can. As you walk down, and you wouldn't be able to know what it was, see what it is. So all of those elements that are part of this wonderful industry, are lost on most people. And unless we change that, a whole generation will grow up not even knowing that it was printed in the first place.
We do totally take it for granted. And I just had this conversation as well. We do a lot of out of home. So wrapping buildings and transits and, wall coverings and things that you see in your corporate offices.
Mhm.
But that was the exact point. People don't have any idea. Like everybody talks about the digital world and everybody's living in digital and it's all about digital. But we would have a very um gray space that we lived in this world if it
Yeah,
wasn't for the vibrancy of print
yeah,
that is
so true.
everywhere we are. We were talking about writing, getting on a plane. We're always all traveling all over the place, right? So as you get on the plane, you walk down the jetway and there's just poster after poster, you know.
Mm.
Or we were on a train in Florida that goes back and forth. We were all just riding on it and all of the out of home graphics that were surrounding us the entire time. So it's everywhere, but we take it for granted, and a lot of people don't even realize that that's what it is. To your point,
It'd be an interesting experiment, wouldn't it? If because I don't know how much you take in subliminally as a human being, and to your point about airports, well, anywhere that's wrapped, do you notice it if it's there? Would you notice it if it wasn't?
mm,
So if
think
we
about
just
that.
walked through a bland beige walkway, through the airport, would we go, why isn't there anything on the walls? Or do we walk through thinking, knowing that there's something on the walls, but not really seeing it?
Okay, but here's the thing: because I'm in print, I do notice it.
Yeah, fair point.
You know what I mean? So if I was just a layman,
Yeah,
not in print, maybe I
yeah,
wouldn't notice it. But
yeah,
I constantly see it. But
yeah.
that I'm
No, I
trained,
get
that's my trained eye, I
it. Yeah,
guess.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yep.
No, I get that. And my favorite sign of all time, actually, printed sign, was a housing development not far from where I live. And they had a sign that was while it was being built, they had a sign up on like the hoardings that it said, "If you lived here, you'd be home by now." And I kind of like that sort of stuff.
Well, I was just thinking about the billboards that I see sometimes that it's an advertisement to use a billboard, but it was like, do billboards work? It just did.
Yeah.
Like you just paid attention and saw it. So
Yeah, yeah.
very similar to you would already be home now. Yeah.
So tell me a little bit more about Sandy Alexander then, and you've mentioned a few things that you do. I had a quick dive into the website, before we spoke, and you really do quite a lot of things, don't you?
We do. And it's kind of interesting balancing that. Like a lot of the people that I am friends with in the industry, they have a very niche piece of business that they do. And we cover a lot of ground. So we work with a multitude of industries as well. So everything from life sciences and pharma to automotive, retail. I just mentioned dining, um, the beauty industry, the healthcare industry, financial. So we touch a lot of different industries. Um, but the fun part is because we offer so much, we get to kind of sometimes be kind of a one-stop shop, we like to say.
Hmm.
So whether it's if you're a retailer and you're working on your in-store execution, and it's your visual merchandising team that are coming up with their window graphics and store signage and all of that, we're supporting you there. But if you're also their CRM and loyalty team that are trying to execute loyalty programs and acquisition programs, we're helping them with all of their direct mail executions. Similarly, for the banking industry, we can help you do your transactional communications. We can help you do your high-end private client communications, but then we're also printing your annual report for more corporate
Okay.
communications.
Yeah, yeah.
So, um, yeah, and like I mentioned, the dining industry is about 20% of
Mm.
our business. And so anytime people in the States or even internationally are walking into an Outback or an Olive Garden or a Denny's for breakfast, we've printed those menus that are in your hands.
Yeah.
So it's kind of all over the board. And then we also have had a lot of fun the last few years getting involved in some of the major brands that we all recognize doing their corporate environments.
Hmm.
So folks like Netflix and Amazon, they're just trying to create spaces that people want to come back to for work.
Sure.
and to make them interesting and dimensional, and every floor have a different vibe and feel. So we'll work with their architectural firms and contractors to use all of our capabilities to create these really interesting and colorful spaces. So we're kind of we're all over the place. Yeah, but it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I don't see it that way. I think it's very cleverly targeted at a variety of
Hmm.
industries that in many ways your core skills, your core functions can be used in multiple ways.
Hmm.
Rather, because I think the risk comes, and print shops and print businesses struggle when they try to be everything for everybody. But actually, if you do one or two key functions really well, but recognize that it can sit in different markets,
Hmm.
because one man's menu is another man's. Let's think of something that a menu could be something else. Oh, you see my point. I can't think of something off the top
Yes.
of my head, but the core competencies of your business can be used in multiple ways, can't they?
Yes, and actually it's one of the things that our clients love about us is because we work with so many industries, they get very siloed and
Mm,
very myoptical about how they're looking at their
mm,
industry. And so they kind of just live in their space. And so when we can come in and say to a casino or, a hotel chain, well, you know what, the pharmaceutical industry used it this way, or the
yeah.
automotive industry used it this way, and it gets them completely, it gets their creative wheels spinning.
Mm,
And because people are approaching things differently, but to your point, similar concept, similar tactics, just used in a different way. So we do a lot of cross sharing of ideas because of the different industries that we work with, that open up people's minds a little bit.
it's quite handy to be able to almost have cross-industry focus group, case studies to a certain extent.
So one of my wish lists, maybe we're going to put this out to the universe right now. One of the things I've been wanting to do for the last couple of years, I think it's because I've been on advisory councils for, HP and Canon and some others, that I just love that environment of
Mm,
sharing and learning from each other. So I want to start our own advisory council at Sandy, but to have, a customer from each of our core markets come and sit around a table and learn from each other and teach us, what they need and what we can
mm,
do to help them accomplish it. I think it would be really interesting. So putting it out there. If
mm.
anybody's interested, email me. We can
I
get you
like it.
start. We can start our advisory council at Sandy.
I like it. We could call it the Board of Print. No, that's a bad idea. So that's been tried by somebody. I can't remember who. Uh, Interesting last 12 months. I think you would agree in the world, never mind the world of print. 2025 was
Mm,
let's call it quite headwindy. I think is the best way to describe
something.
it. Um,
Hmm.
I'm not going to go back in time. I'm going to go forward in time. We sit
Yes.
here today with this beautiful view from the top of the lighthouse of the whole industry. What would you like to see happening in the next 12 months, and what do you expect to see happening in the next 12 months?
Man, we've just been having conversations about this. We can still see and feel the hesitancy of some of the brands that we're working with because of
Mm,
the headwinds, as you call it.
mm,
Um, And so that's a little concerning, right? I mean, we all are trying to figure out where this is all going to go. Um, but I do think one of the things that's been encouraging is that we are seeing our customers recognize that they still need to have that moment with their consumers. Um, but they're just doing it in a different way.
mhm,
And so how can we as printers walk alongside that path of trying to figure out how to do things differently to engage with consumers differently. Um, and so although it's changing, it's still here. I just had somebody on Color Bar, Francis McMahon, and he was like, "Oh, print is life, and this is not the end. This is just the beginning."
yeah.
And I agree with that. I think that people are starting to recognize that yes, people still engage with this bad boy all
Hmm.
day, every day, but there's something to be said about having something to touch and feel and to connect with. There's
Mm,
something very intimate sometimes about that physical connection. And so we're seeing that from retailers and others that we're working with, where even in store, they're trying to make it this moment. and they're trying
Sure.
to create these experiences, and print is a big part of that. So that's a piece of it. But then we also have been talking a lot about having those moments, what we've been calling surround sound,
Mhm.
where you don't just experience it in one channel, you experience it in your entire life. So yes,
Yeah.
it's hitting your phone. Yes, you're seeing it in store, but then you're seeing it in your mailbox. You're seeing it out of home. And so you're just constantly hearing that same message from these brands and all the places that your life takes you. And so we get to be a part of that. So that surround sound moment, I think, is going to be where we have to be able to take it. And we as printers have to embrace the
Mm.
digital and know that that needs to be a part of our story as well for print to remain impactful.
I think one of the things that digital helps that argument with is the vibrancy of color. I love the fact that your pod is called Color Bar because I think as human beings we are very triggered in a good way by color. It's a bit
Mm-hmm.
like we when the sun comes out, we'll oh the sun's out, and the sun comes
Yes,
out quite regularly, but we still get excited that the
we
sun
still
comes
get
out.
excited.
And so when you see the cleverness of digital that's emerged over the last 15, 20 years to be able to replicate something in our hand, your phone that you just picked up, that allows us to see the things that we love to see. I think that continues our love affair with color.
Mm.
And as human beings, because it would be so much easier if it was all beige, right? No, nobody would, you wouldn't need any red paint in your life. But the reality is we love and we manifest our dreams and excitement through living color. So I think
Mm.
print has a huge part to play in that. I'm a big fan of direct to consumer conversations
Mm-hmm.
and activations and what have you. I've been involved in a few campaigns over my time in the personalization space, but constantly people will always say, "Oh, it looks amazing." So we buy with our eyes before anything, don't we? And print will always allow us to do that, won't it?
Yes. Yep. I I'm thinking about my comment about having to embrace the digital piece of it. And just before I jumped on with you, I was on another call about AI, of course.
Of course.
Of course. But we're doing some really fun and interesting things where we're embracing even AI,
Hmm.
but in the print environment. So we're incorporating what we've been saying is like direct mail is now talking back
Mm,
to the consumer. And so, to put a QR code on a direct mail piece that's scanned and it immediately engages a conversation with the recipient.
mm,
So they continue, now the brands get to be able to even continue the brand story through their AI bot, but also through a channel that's a little, more traditional, but now they're
mhm,
tying in the digital to it and now truly having a conversation with their consumers in the consumer's home. They don't
mm.
have to come into the store. They don't have to go to the website. Obviously, that's where we want to guide them
Sure,
to,
sure. Yeah.
but they're starting those conversations at the mailbox, which is
Yeah.
pretty interesting. And so we're excited to see where that might take some brands and see how it's embraced and see how it's accepted out in the market.
And all those years ago that I was involved in Share a Coke when it happened the first time around, that Coca-Cola's whole goal from that campaign was to say hello to people. And basic conversation starts with hello, and it's great if you know your name, and it's even better if you talk back.
Mm.
Because you can't have a conversation if only one of you's talking. And so I think to your point about AI, if it's used, and I'm sure it will be used cleverly by brands to not just engage with people, but also have a to and fro.
Hmm.
And that's a starting point for any conversation. We are very, as human beings, I think we're very natural communicators. But somewhere along the lines, if we're not careful, the thumbs will replace everything that we were taught how to do and learn how to do. Are you worried at all that in the print industry, the reliance or the excitement, should I say, about AI, people will forget that human to human is probably the most important thing in the world?
No, I'm not. Every conversation I've had about it, whether it's just sitting on my couch or whether it's on Color Bar or whether it's whatever, everybody has come back to the point of there still has to be that human piece
Mm,
to it. there still has to be somebody that's making sure that there is authenticity keeps coming up in all of the conversations.
Mm.
There has to be a humble approach to it. There has to be an honest approach to it. Like we can't just lean in to that solely, or we're going to
Mm.
lose, or we're going to lose our souls.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
You know what I mean? So no, I'm not afraid of it. I think I'm more excited by it. I'm excited because I know how much time it's given me back in
Hmm.
my day. That allows me to be more strategic, that allows me to think more versus just do tactical actions all day long, which feel
Yeah.
very unfulfilling. So I'm embracing it. And most people that I've talked to are trying to take it from that same approach of using it to do those tasks that we don't want to do so we can go do the things that we love, which I think is just going to bring more creativity and more excitement to what we do every day.
Yeah, no, I'm with you. And actually, I did a Lighthouse podcast a few weeks back with a lovely lady in India, and we were talking about AI. And I shared with her a picture of, because we're at that inflection point, aren't we, where people get scared. Something's new, therefore it must be scary because our natural tendency is to worry as human beings. And we were talking about this particular pivot point of technology. And I showed her a picture of, I think it was from 1905, and it was a guy who had a lot of horses, and they invented the car. And he was like, nobody needs a car. We're fine with horses. In the end, he bought a car because he felt as though he should try and keep up with people. And there's a picture of him sitting in his car, but it's being towed by one of his horses. So we are at that sort of adoption point where, and
Yep.
this is why I asked the question. It's sort of like, well, I recognize that it's a tool. I recognize that it's helpful. And I don't like some of the stuff that it does, but I do like some of the stuff that it does. Isn't that every technological
Mm-hmm.
development ever, basically?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm gonna go back and can I ask you a question?
Sure.
Um, so share a Coke that you were a part of that campaign is fascinating to me. And sometimes it feels like it was forever ago, but
Mm.
it was so spectacular at the time and so forward thinking. And we talked about intention a moment ago. So when you're sitting around planning this campaign, you talked about the intention was to start a conversation, but how did that even start? And now looking back, or I guess looking forward as to how far we've come, what are your thoughts on that?
It's quite interesting that everybody still thinks that campaign was some kind of witchcraft, and it really wasn't. And it wasn't even really personalization, even though it's banded as such. It was customization because they only
Mm-hmm.
really let you choose from a list of names that they'd let you choose from. And that's no different to finding a key ring at the seaside with your name on it. If you're lucky, you find one, that kind of thing. That aside, what was the intention? It really started with ironically, a statistic, a data point where Coca-Cola Company had seen the reduction in the number of teenagers that were drinking Coca-Cola. And it frightened the bejesus out of them to draw on my Irish ancestry, and they needed to do something about it. And the best way to do something about anything is to say hello to a bunch of people. The best way to say hello to people is to use their name. So the whole notion of the share a Coke was not to sell more Coca-Cola. It was to start a conversation with a generation of people that hopefully would go on to drink Coca-Cola, which they did. Therefore, it worked. It gets seen in isolation in different ways because it did lots of things at a macro level. It did lots of things, not least of
Mm-hmm.
which for digital print, not least of which for HP, not least of which for all sorts of things. Me, I've
Yeah.
ended up with a 12-year speaking career out of sticking labels on bottles. I mean, how ridiculous is that? But the initial intent, to your point about intention, was to say hello to people because they were worried that if they didn't, they'd walk past them. And I think it's quite a valuable lesson to brands, full stop, that if you're not careful, if you don't speak to your audience occasionally
Mm-hmm.
and just for no reason, we don't have to sell somebody something all the time. But
Yeah.
actually, if you keep a conversation going, there's half a chance that they'll buy something. And when people buy from you, that's very different from you selling to them.
Mm.
There you go. I've slipped into guest on your podcast mode
I mean, I
instantly.
know
So
I went into host mode. I like it. I
but
like it.
it
No,
is
it's just
fascinating, and I was gonna ask you a little bit about how you deploy personalization at Sandy Alexander, because I think it is a part of the suite of weapons that we have to be able to engage with consumers. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. And it's such a huge part of our conversation. And I think now people expect it. Um,
Yeah,
and so if we don't, again, if we don't keep up with what people's expectations are, we're going to get left behind pretty quickly. And thank God we've got the technology and it's only going to continue to
yeah,
improve. But to be able to provide it, but we almost anything that we're putting on our digital presses, whether that's a sheet fed or an inkjet web or anything, it's personalized to the automotive industry. When somebody goes to an auto show and you know they sign up or they do whatever it is. I mean, we're to the point of it's the color that you asked about, it's the exact car
yeah,
that you asked about.
yeah.
And so when they get it, and we talked about this a little bit, sometimes the creep factor, people are like, how creepy do we want to get? We get pretty creepy. We get pretty creepy sometimes. But no, and like also being able to really understand people's preferences. We talk
Yeah.
about this all the time. Getting the right message at the right time is really important. Um, so for folks that are these loyalty members of whether it's the airline that you travel or the hotel that you stay in all the time or the store that you shop in, you expect them to
Mm,
know you.
mm,
And we get pretty angry if we feel like you don't. And
yeah,
so that's a lot of the conversations that we have with our customers that have all of this data on their customers, and how do we not dip into the creep level, but how do we let them know that we know them, we appreciate them, we know what they want, we know when they want it,
yeah,
and to be very, again, I'll use the word intentional, very intentional about that, um, and also deploying the technologies that we have now to automate these things
mm,
so they can be very triggered and they can be at the right time and they can use as much data as we want to be able to
mm,
get there. So I say this all the time. I talk data and tech more than I talk ink on paper
mm.
these days because of everything I just said. So
Sure.
it's a big
Yeah.
part of what we do.
No, and that's nice to hear you say that, because the recognition that actually the thing about personalization that people like the most is when it's personal. And
Yeah.
the irony is your name is the least personal thing about you, because everybody knows that or can find that out. But if
Yes.
if I knew that you like the last three lines from a song from Fleetwood Mac, that's personal. A memory from a holiday, a lyric from a film, or whatever it is. And I think brands get a bit lazy with personalization because they just assume, let's just stick your name on it and that's fine, it's been personalized. Well, actually, it's been far from personalized, if that's the case.
Yeah. And like I said, people now are expecting it. Like I had a recent conversation about the pet industry
Hmm.
and how we're all obsessed with our, pet children. And, if it's the pet store that you go to all the time or it's your veterinary, they ex- we expect you to know
Yeah.
what my dog's name is and that she's a female and, and that they don't incorporate that into it is really a missed moment with these people that you get something in the mail that has a picture of your dog or has their name or whatever it is, the likelihood of you engaging with that piece goes
Yeah.
up tremendously. And I think there's probably a lot of industries that same kind of thought process would work
Yeah,
if they took
it does.
advantage of it.
And I'm laughing because it's where you need to make sure that the connection point between that personalized response to a customer comes from a human to a human. Because the second you hand it over to an algorithm, it doesn't understand the nature and the nuance, shall we say, of human behavior. And I'll give you an example. So
Let's do it.
my brother-in-law doesn't like cats, but they have a cat. So the only way
Mm.
he would have a cat was if the cat was called, I don't know whether I should say the name on here because it's quite rude. Let's imagine it's the rudest word that you could think of for the name of the cat. And so they get the email from the vet about an appointment for the cat. But the algorithm, of course, has personalized that in the name of the cat. So it was this particular word and his surname as the header on the email, which is mildly offensive, I would say. But of course,
Oh
they're
my
not there
lord.
being personal with their comms and what have you. And actually, they were insulting the living daylights. Now, my brother-in-law found it funny, but you can
Yes.
see how these things can go wrong.
Yes. Yes. That's really funny. That's really funny. Where do you think um where do you think personalization should go next? As you were one of the founding fathers, it feels like.
I said I was 150 years old, didn't I?
Yes.
Uh, I think your point is very true that it's become standard. People expect it now. So I think the days when it was a luxury or a an upgrade, I think are no longer there. But I think
Mhm.
it's where the sensitivity of the deployment comes and the purpose of that. It shouldn't just because you can doesn't mean you should. Is never not true. And I've seen and stopped some brands from doing personalized products that just wouldn't have worked at all in the marketplace. So I think it's the genie's out the bottle. The industry knows how to do it. The industry knows how to deploy it. The only thing I would suggest is that they look at what actually means something to people. That whole piece where, as human beings, I always say this, right, in speeches, that we buy each other gifts. I buy you a gift, and then I stand there to watch you unwrap it. And it's not because I don't know what it is, but I want to see the look on your face when you open it. Because actually, the personalized piece has got nothing to do with it. It's the emotional connection that it brings. So if you
Mm.
can get that right and deploy personal, whatever, maybe not from the vets, but wherever personalization gets you a little bit there, that's where it needs to go next. And I don't think it's got there well enough yet. It's been used for humor and dark comedy, which was fine. I'm up for that as much as the next man. But I think in terms of it having a value point across a brand, a wide set of brands, it needs to be understood a little bit more. So I'd like it to be. I'd like it to be understood more for what we as human beings get from it.
How do we do that?
Tune in for episode 2 of how Rich and Betsy solve the world's problems here on Print Island. I don't know, but do you know what?
Yeah,
Let's string it out for the next 10 years, and then people will pay us to find out.
let's do it. Let's do it. We can just keep talking about it. Just keep paying us to talk
Absolutely.
about this stuff. Yeah.
Absolutely. So, listen, we have sadly run out of time on Print Island, but I do
Well, this
thank
was
you
fun.
so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you for coming to my lighthouse. If you could see one thing from the top of Print Island today that you would like to see coming in 2026 for you personally or professionally, what's your wish? And we'll see if we can make it come true.
Mm. You know what I was saying to somebody the other day, that I want this year to be one of flow. Like I kind of just want some ease and flow. Like you said, 2025 was one full of headwinds.
Mm,
And I'm kind of ready to just have a lot of fun doing what we just got finished talking about for this last
yeah.
45 minutes or so, and to just kind of flow with it
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
enjoy it and take some time to just breathe and have some fun with it. That's what I want. And there's a lighthouse right next door to me, so maybe I'll just climb to the top of it and just sit up there
There
and
you
take a
go.
quick breath, look at the lake,
Yeah, there you go.
and remind myself of that on occasion. Yeah.
It's a sign, and yeah, I agree with you. I'd take a crosswind, to be honest. Anything that's just different from 2025 would be
Yes.
would be good as far as I'm concerned. But listen, thank
Yes.
you so much for your time today. It's been a pleasure chatting to you, Betsy
Absolutely.
Davis. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Rich. See you guys. Thanks for letting me be on.